Welcome to Let's Talk Ball. I'm Thad Brown along with Carl Jones. We are here every single week breaking down the X's and the O's, looking at the film from every single Bills game. Bills-Giants was a win, but Carl, I don't think there's going to be a whole lot positive we will say about the Bills after this game, and especially that goes for the offense.
You know how they say the good, bad, and the ugly? Well, it was a lot of the latter two in this one game right here, especially when you watch it back. You're like, oh, I see how this game turned out the way it was supposed to, considering they were 15.5-point favorites going in. I think we all kind of figured it was going to be a blowout. Wasn't the case Sunday night.
Let's start with the coordinator, Ken Dorsey, who's taking a lot of fire. Look, I think I'm not going to say this game had 1,000 things that I thought he did wrong. There were plays and items that I don't like, but it's more so continuous of what he's been doing all year than anything I particularly saw in this game. You know, one thing that we haven't talked about specifically that I want to get into before we're going to dive in the weeds here and then come back out, but when they run a lot of mesh concepts, which is receivers outside coming together, when most teams run them, it's 1-2 steps and cross like 3-4 yards below the line of scrimmage so you can get somebody open fast. The Bills run it 10 yards downfield so that by the time anybody's open, you're like 2.5-3 seconds into the play. I don't know how you expect a quarterback to always be available for that. You know, so that has bothered me. You know, beyond that in this game, there wasn't anything that overly stuck out as, wow, that was terrible. I mean, the touchdown they drew up to Hardy was a nice little call, and there were 2 or 3 of those. So a mixed bag for me, Ken Dorsey game, but not improving on any of the things that I think people have been complaining about going into this. And I wasn't even really bothered that much with that shotgun run of the goal line that everybody hated.
Honestly, for a while, I didn't like shotguns on the goal line because it's like, oh, just QB sneaky. But with quarterback run being such an advantage for offense these days, when you put the quarterback back at shotgun, you do add him into the running game, which when you have Josh Allen, who's 295 pounds or how much he weighs these days, he's a legit threat down there. Now, granted, they haven't used him in that facet, but when he's back there in shotgun, he also is a threat to run the ball. So I'm not really too concerned with Josh Allen being in gun in terms of, oh, just put him under center and QB sneak. Well, yeah, I think that's a logical thing, but I'm not really too concerned in that regard. Having said that, in terms of Ken Dorsey in general about this game, I think they started off well. Now, Stephon Diggs had the drop on the first drive, and then the Gabe Davis got tripped.
Right.
So then they kind of got out of like the little decent like mojo they had, and then on the very next drive, they were driving a little bit, and then Gabe Davis fumbles. And then after that, they just never got into any rhythm whatsoever, whether it was throwing the ball, running the ball. And I'm not going to say, oh, like they couldn't get out of the funk. Like they couldn't, I guess, get out of their own way to a certain extent. But it wasn't like I didn't see promise at any point. You watched it back, you're like, all right, that drop killed the drive. Like the second trip wasn't a trip that would have affected the play, but the Gabe Davis trip legitimately flipped the field. Like They would have been in deep into Giants territory. So I think watching it back, I don't know if there's an overarching theme on Ken Dorsey, but it wasn't good to see for 50% of this game you couldn't move the ball on the Giants.
I want to take 30 seconds quick to talk about the rhythm comment, because everybody talked about it after the game. We couldn't get into a rhythm. And I kind of look at that as a non-reason, because to get into a rhythm, you have to be succeeding. Why didn't you get into a rhythm? You weren't succeeding. Don't tell me you didn't get into a rhythm and that's why you weren't succeeding. That's like saying, why didn't we win the game? We didn't score more points to their team. Of course, idiot. That's the only way you can not win a game.
Right, yeah.
But as someone who played, is there anything to getting into a rhythm? In other words, if you get one first down, does that make it any more likely that you get the next first down?
To a certain extent, yeah, but I think a lot of the times with the Bills, a lot of it was just execution. It wasn't like there was like some belief like, oh, like I got this macho man thing, like I'm locked in now. Like a drop is a drop. I don't care if we're in rhythm or not. Mm-hmm. Like Stephon Diggs doesn't drop passes because he's out of rhythm. He just drops passes because it just happens.
It happens.
You know, like Gabe Davis didn't fumble the ball right there because he was out of rhythm. Like whether it was Josh Allen leaving pockets, he's left pockets when he's been in rhythm before. Like I don't think this game was any indication of, oh, they were in a rut and could have got out of it. Like they just didn't play well. Point blank period, and the Giants had a game plan for them that they couldn't figure out until literally the end of the game.
You talk about the receivers, good segue into what has been another consistent problem for the offense, which is secondary receiver production. And this was a game that kind of screamed out, you know, no one else was available. It got to the point where Josh Allen, to his own detriment, was locked on to Stephon Diggs. As much as, you know, the Bills should and do involve Stephon Diggs, there are other guys that need to produce. But you and I were talking about this a little while ago. The problem with that is it's not like Gabe Davis or Dawson Knox or Deontay Hardy are running around wide open waving flags. Look at me. They're generally covered, which is why Josh Allen's not throwing to them. So I mean, there were a couple plays in this game where they had Gabe Davis pass blocking, which, when you think about it for your number 2 receiver is a bananas thought, but me and you will tell you, Gabe Davis is probably more effective as a blocker than he is as a receiver, so I get it. I don't know where you go in terms of creating production for those guys.
That's where it's going to be interesting going forward, because there were a few plays where you're like, man, Josh, come off of Diggs. Someone else is wide open. But it wasn't like that was out of the –
It was a couple of plays.
Out of the 30 targets he had, dropbacks he had, it wasn't like you said, it wasn't like, like every single time someone else was open. Like, nah, the one that sticks out in memory was the one play where the Giants doubled Stephon Diggs on the left side at the top of the screen. And when you watch it on TV, you're like, man, Josh, go to somebody else. It was obvious he was getting doubled. Well, you watch it back. Dawson Knox is covered on a drag. Deontay Hardy's covered on like a little sail route. And whoever was the clear out, he never had a chance ever. So I'm like, you know what? Might as well give the chance to 14. He has a better chance of catching the ball than anyone else.
Even doubled.
Mm-hmm. So that where it was it was very concerning, because the volume of targets for me isn't really the biggest issue, because if he's that darn good, I don't care. Go ahead. But the issue is the other guys just aren't winning. That's where I'm like, all right, that's a big problem for me.
Run game for the Bills. Look, there was success, and I give Dorsey credit and the offensive line credit for opening holes. But in this game, and this has kind of been a theme all year, when you count guys in the box, the Bills are running the ball 7-on-6, 8-on-7, 6-on-6. Normally, for people who don't watch film all the time, because the quarterback is not a part of the run game, a defense will line up with the numbers in their advantage. So when the Bills are at either an even state numbers-wise or have the advantage, to run the ball for 4 or 5 yards a pop, which is what the Bills did, is really not impressive. Now, look, the Bills are taking what they're supposed to take. They're keeping drives moving. James Cook had a decent second half. So there's positives there, but I'm not going to sit here and walk away from this game and write home about how the Bills were great in the run game either.
I think that is a continuation of how they're changing their offense this year. And it's through 6 weeks. I believe they played 6 games. Yep. They're evolving their offense in terms of taking Josh Allen out of the run game. Mm-hmm. And, they talked about it ad nauseum all offseason. We didn't believe it at first, I guess. Like, are they really going to take Josh out of the run game?
They have done that.
They have done that, so I will give them credit for that. And I know they'll bring it back. Well, you assume they'll bring it back for the postseason, deeper in the year. But this is going to be by far his least amount of carries in his career, not even close. So, of course, some of the staples, the easy button plays where you can just get 4 or 5 yards, Josh Allen can do that for you. This year, those easy gains aren't there for you because you removed it. So I think that's where they're struggling a little bit when they don't have the numbers advantage, because they've always had, the trump card, Josh Allen.
Right.
So I think that's where a little bit of the funk in terms of the numbers advantage is coming from for the Bills' run game.
Up front, I thought this was the worst game that O'Cyrus Torrence and Connor McGovern had in a Bills uniform. I don't think either guy was bad, because they've been playing pretty solid up until this point. But in this game, both in the run and in the pass, I didn't think either guy was really up to snuff. Deion Dawkins, after having a terrible game against Josh Allen the week before, I think was pretty solid against Kayvon Thibodeau. But the offensive line, I don't know if Josh Allen trusts them enough, because there were 2 or 3 or 4 plays where you see the quarterback, bailing out of clean enough pockets. And I don't know if we're talking about the same play, but going back to the one you brought up where Diggs is doubled and the other guys are covered, I think it was that play. I thought Hardy was clear in there. And if Allen sits in the pocket more, he's able to make that throw. But because he saw any kind of white jersey, he was gone. And look, as good as Josh Allen is scrambling, and he's amazing, it does pretty much ruin whatever passing concept was called. And, we talk about secondary receiver production. Well, those guys can't produce if what they're supposed to do on a play is irrelevant, because your quarterback's going to go do what he wants. And it was increasing in frequency last week and this week to where Josh Allen's not staying within the structure.
I think that also ties into the pass pro from the running backs. There was a couple reps where James Cook it was a play action, Josh Allen turns around and it was a color right in front of him. Now, Josh Allen, he made that play work, but I don't think it's just the 5 people up front. There was another delay blitz from the backer. That might be Josh's responsibility, but he came scot-free right off the edge of Deion Dawkins. Up front in total, there's just a bunch of just moving parts that are just coming too scot-free back to 17. And you can't live in any conducive world in terms of offense continuity when you're consistently moving off your spot. There's pressure from here, pressure from there. It's just a whole bunch of just not going well in terms of protecting 17, whether that's him calling out protections to 5 people up front or just James Cook literally whiffing on the backer blitzing.
Yeah, James Cook as a blitz pickup guy is 100% a liability right now. You know, it's enough where you might see Latavius Murray get third down snaps because they can't trust him at the moment to pick those blitzes up.
Especially since Cook isn't like a great receiver right now where he must play on third down.
All right, let's move to the defensive side of the ball. This is the weekly portion where we rave about Ed Oliver, who was bananas good again. The highlight play to me was when he used the guy who was blocking him to make the tackle. He literally walked the tackle into Saquon Barkley and knocked him down by shoving the offensive lineman into Barkley. And that's just the single underline of how good Oliver was in this game.
There were a couple plays where he got off the ball so fast. Tyrod Taylor almost got tripped. Like, he was just a phenomenal ball player, and he's going to have to continue to play at that level without Daquan Jones next to him. And he had, I believe, 80-something percent of the snaps as well.
It felt like he was out there a lot.
It wasn't like he was out there like on his normal rotation where he can, rest a little bit. Like, no, he was out the majority of the game, and he did his part.
And how good was he and how important is he? The 3 or 4 snaps where he got blocked, those are pretty much all the big Saquon Barkley runs. Like, if you want to, when did he not play well? Well, when Saquon Barkley went for 15, it's because Ed Oliver actually got single blocked once or twice in this game, but he was just unbelievable. Let's talk about the linebackers quick here. Terrell Bernard, Dorian Williams starting together for the first time. A far cry from Tremaine Edmonds and Matt Milano. And look, understandably so, those other 2 guys are great, great players. I was a little disappointed in this game. I thought, look, these are 2 undersized linebackers, and it looked it. I thought both guys got blocked fairly easily a lot. Now, Bernard still had his group of plays where he'd navigated, wiggle his way through blocking and make a couple good tackles. And the pass coverage was okay. Williams had a great one-on-one with Saquon Barkley in the second quarter. But I thought Bernard was a little less than what we've seen from him the first 4 weeks of the year. And Williams as a tackler leaves a lot to be desired. The big 34-yard run is Williams in the hole, essentially not being blocked and just whiffing on the play.
Yeah, and going back to the pass coverage responsibilities, a lot of those third downs were the corners really didn't get a lot of action in terms of this game, and they were kind of right in the middle of the field. A lot of that is just route recognition where the backers just aren't feeling it. A couple of them were Dorian Williams. I can think one off the top of my head where the inside receiver just sat down right in front of him. He just couldn't get a feel. Now, you either A, hope that's just with him being out there
inexperience,
or B, there's just some guys who just don't have that. Like,
right.
That's just a thing. So you hope that that's the case in his regard. But there was definitely some Tyrod Taylor plays where he just threw it right to the sticks, and the backers just didn't have a good enough feel for the routes behind them. So I didn't think they played amazing either.
I want to ask you about that because there, like you said, a lot of the third down conversions were short throws between the outside corner and the backer. And you're saying it's on the backer. I wondered on a few of those, do you want your corner squeezing in a little more? I guess I'd have to go to each one and figure out where the other receivers are. But there were 1 or 2 where you had Taron Johnson going outside with a wide guy. Like, I remember one, Johnson goes outside with a short wide receiver, and then the throw is made between Elam and Benford, I think. And Elam is basically guarding the sideline, And I'm not saying he's wrong. There's a good chance that's his responsibility. But, looking at the play, the thing that would make the most sense would be bring your corner in and help close that gap down a little bit.
I think this is where this kind of new realm of when you're not playing with Matt Milano, when you're not playing with Trey White.
When you're not playing with someone who you know intimately next to you.
You can't play as aggressive as you want in terms of play calls. So there's going to be some situations we're going to have to give and take. You can't all the time be aggressive. So you're telling guys, I want you to just a spot drop and just protect your area, right? You're not going to match patterns as much as we used to when you have a guy like Matt Milano who can really feel anything behind him, or a guy like Trey White who is really instinctive in those areas. So there's going to be some times where guys are just going to drop back and just
be in their area.
And if the route comes to them, it comes to them. So I think it's a little bit of both. I mean, Sean McDermott is going to try to figure out over these next 3 months or so how to figure out a way to stay aggressive while at the same time not putting his guys in harm's way.
Let's talk about the corners now. I thought Brian Dable, for the most part, did a nice job dissecting some zones. There were a few routes concepts where you're like, okay, Dable knows where the Bills are going to be. He knows how to exploit it, and they just went and made sure it was good. Elam and Benford did not impress. I thought Benford was a little better than Elam, but outside of a couple deep balls, there weren't really a whole lot of opportunities where you said, oh, well, I need my corner to make that play. For the most part, they were sitting back. They were making sure things didn't go over their head. They were coming up and tackling. It felt like they were doing what they were asked to do, even if it wasn't super impressive.
I mean, Sean McDermott kind of gave us a little peek into how they're going to play from here on out without Matt Milano, without a pass rush that's maybe not at its peak, and Trey White as well. I will say I thought Benford had a sequence in the late third quarter, fourth quarter where he did his job and it really tipped the scales in the Bills' favor. It was a 3rd and 14 where Tyrod Taylor wanted a screen at the bottom, wanted a screen. Benford got in, knifed it, so he had to come off of it, and I believe he chucked it somewhere else. But the play that I love that, Benford's a great tackler, but the one-on-one tackle with Saquon Barkley, I don't think is getting enough pub. If Barkley breaks that tackle, that's a house call. And tackling Saquon Barkley is hard enough. Doing it at 190 pounds, every OC, Brian Daboll, when he drew this play up, he said, look, I want y'all to block everybody but that corner over there, Saquon, make him fall. And Benford did a good enough job of bringing him to the ground. That was good. And then obviously the PBU at the end of the game was very, very good in every aspect of the word. Elam really didn't do anything to stick out. Tackling still wasn't great. I mean, the long Saquon run was
your weekly flag from Elam, unfortunately. You know,
it was 2 plays back to back where I thought he could have gone. When you watch it back on film, I didn't know which one was holding because it was 2 plays in a row.
Right.
So I thought Benford played better as the game went on.
Taron Johnson was amazing in this game. He is a lot. Everybody saw the play at the end of the game. Yes, it was probably pass interference, but whatever. The guy made the play. But beyond that, as a run stopper, we haven't talked about him as much because, Milano's been having such a great year. You haven't need to see 7. But in this game where the linebackers did not involve Matt Milano, he did stick out to me more and was doing his thing. He's like a missile, coming over 4 gaps laterally to blow up run plays, and you cannot overstate how valuable that is. And you were talking about it too. It wasn't just making tackles and he was free. It was getting off blocks.
He had 15 tackles. The nickel corner led the team in tackles. There was one play where he threw a guard off of him. A guard is 300 pounds. Taron Johnson is 190 on a good day, right? It's just an all-around great player, and they're going to need a player at that second level to be, I guess, an all-pro type of guy without Matt Milano right there. And Taron Johnson, I think is good enough to do that.
Final thought from me on defense. Von Miller looks really slow. Looks, almost to the point where I wonder if the Bills weren't in an injury crunch in London, if they would not have activated him. I guess at some point you need to get him out there and get him back into game shape. He said it himself. It's going to take a while to get me into game shape. But he did not look like a guy that was intimidating anybody. And, for Von Miller, it's the speed and the agility, and it's just not there so far.
The get off. I think that's the thing that was getting me. With the elite pass rushers, it's 2 things, the bend and the get off. He doesn't have either right now. Like when he's getting off the ball at the same rate as everyone else, which is, I guess, is all right.
It could be worse.
It could be worse.
Right, coming off an ACL.
But then the bend at the top, where that's the vintage Von Miller play, where he's underneath the tackle and he's like 90 degrees parallel. You're like, how is he doing this? That's not there yet. So who knows when, if that comes back? But Sunday night, you didn't see Von Miller.
A.J. Epinesa, by the way, has the get off. The first sack he had, I watched that 4 or 5 times in a row. I'm like, did he jump the snap there? He just blew past the tackle. And look, I don't know if Epinesa can continue playing this way, but the last few weeks he has been absolutely excellent. Anything else from you defensively?
Nah, they just got to they're lucky they have this stretch right now where they get to figure things out against the Patriots. I think the Bucks. They have some games where they can fill things out a little bit.
Yeah, the Giants were not good. Mark Glowinski had a terrible night. Watching film over with him might have been a nightmare, to be him when they watched the film from that game. But you saw why the Giants were 1-5 and barely competitive, especially when they were on offense. All right, next week we will probably do this on Wednesday because the Bills play on Thursday, so Tuesday will be a busy work day. So we'll be back here probably Wednesday, but we will be here to break down the Bills and the Patriots. Thanks for watching and listening. We're here every week at RochesterFirst.com, on YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. For Carl Jones, I'm Thad Brown. We'll see you next week on Let's Talk Ball.